Alright, David here, and today we're going to be talking about a couple more wheels, and these are both 64mm wheels made by Powell. So the first one that we're going to be trying out today is going to be the Powell 97A G Bones. So this is a wheel that honestly kind of scares me a bit. Whenever I look at the specs on this, I see a relatively narrow contact patch. It's about 30mm, and this is a tall wheel, so it's 64mm, and it's pretty hard at 97A. So the reason this wheel scares me is whenever I see a tall 64mm wheel paired with a 97A durometer, I'm like, oh, that wheel is going to be super fast. But the contact patch is kind of narrow, and on a surfskate where you have a lot of lateral side-to-side motion and deep carving, like, how am I going to be able to do any kind of deep carving or aggressive pumping when I'm going fast like this wheel is capable of going without incidental sliding out? So my guess is this is probably not going to be a surfskate wheel that I would recommend, but we're going to try it out. But as I was looking at Powell wheels, I came across the 64mm 95A Cubics. And I already gave this wheel a shot, and I thought it was actually pretty good. So the reason I like this wheel already is because compared to the G Bones, this wheel has a wider contact patch. It's right at 33.7mm. And it's a 95A durometer, so it's a little bit softer. So with a wider contact patch and a little bit softer durometer when compared to the 97A G Bones, you're going to get more grip, which is going to promote you to be able to carve a little more deeply, to be able to pump a little bit more aggressively. And it's going to be a little bit slower than that G Bones wheel, which means you're going to have a little more confidence to be able to carve and not slide out while going high speeds. I'm going to pad up and we're going to try out these mini cubics. Alright, so I want to point out just a couple things about this bowl real quick. So this bowl actually has quite a lot of flat bottom in it, and this bowl for a lot of people tends to be one that's hard to keep speed. These transitions are pretty dang mellow, but I'm hoping that with the Powell 95A Mini Cubics that I'm going to get a lot of momentum and be able to keep speed really well. Alright, so now we're going to head over to just this little patch of flat ground, and I'm just going to do some flat ground pumping and try to do some aggressive carving and see if these wheels will slide out. Alright, so let's talk about these Powell Mini Cubics. I had some issues with accidentally sliding out a little bit on this transition, but I was able to grip and get back on. Whenever I was pumping these moderately aggressively on this little patch of flat ground behind me, I was getting accidental slide out for sure. So that's going to be the number one issue with these wheels, is that they slide out accidentally. The other issue that I have with them is that they're super wide. And so they're super heavy. Like, they weigh something like 630 grams, whereas like all my other wheels weigh somewhere between 350 and 500-ish grams. So this adds a lot of weight, making your setup super heavy. The other thing I don't like is these wheels aren't the best for coping grinds either. I did do some, and this rounded inner lip does not create the best profile for locking into grinds. A wheel with a more straight edge, like the Powell 60x42 Dragon wheels, locks in super good on coping because it just has a nice little 90-degree pocket that your truck and wheel just settle into really nicely. So I wouldn't recommend these big heavy wheels for doing like long grinds, but I did do some slash grinds on these and scratch the coping a little bit. So those grinds where you're just in the ramp and you're just catching your truck a little, that worked just fine. One silver lining in the Powell Mini Cubics, though, is the fact that this wheel is so rounded and has so much extra material on the sides. My buddy Jude calls them clown shoes, and I agree. I think they look like clown shoes. But the nice thing about all that extra material is if you got these wheels and you kind of like them, but you find that they're a little bit slick, that as you wear them down and this wheel becomes smaller, that contact patch is going to start migrating its way down, and your contact patch is going to gradually get wider. But that brings me back to the Powell G Bones 97A 64mm. So these wheels performed better than I expected, and in my opinion they are a much better choice than the 64mm Mini Cubics. Despite the G Bones having a narrower contact patch than the Mini Cubics and being a harder durometer, in my experience they grip better than the Mini Cubics. And this isn't the first time I've experienced a harder durometer wheel of the same formula gripping better than a softer durometer wheel of the same formula. The Spitfire Formula 4 99A wheels grip better in my experience than the Spitfire Formula 4 97A. So there's always that to consider. So would I recommend these as a Surfskate wheel, and who would I recommend them for? Yes, I would recommend these for riding on a Surfskate, and I would recommend these for the people who are riding big bowls like the one I just featured in this video, and you're just doing kind of drawn out longer carves, and you're just doing bigger, higher speed bowl riding. I would not recommend these wheels for people riding slower in tighter spaces on smaller features, because if you're doing tighter carves going lower speeds, these wheels do not hold on. Here I am showing you a video of me pumping on flat ground, and I had multiple issues with slide out, and I was never trying to slide the wheels out. I was just leaning on the rail like I would if I had, say, Carver Roundhouse Slicks or Surfskate Love Park and Bowl wheels on, and those wheels hold on whenever I lean onto the rail, whereas these wheels will slide out when I lean onto the rail deeply going at slow speeds. But for me personally, this is a wheel that I'm actually happy to have in my quiver of wheels, and I'll take this wheel with me whenever I'm going to skate parks that have bigger bowl features and I just want to roll far and roll fast and just do big drawn out carves. But I wouldn't use these on smaller ramps, mini ramps, and again, I would never use these for tight carving in flat spaces. And I also wouldn't use these for doing any ollie-based maneuvers, because it's such a tall wheel, it raises your setup higher off the ground than it already is, and it just makes ollie tricks harder. I would prefer to use something that's 60mm or smaller for doing ollie-based maneuvers. One more advantage that I forgot to mention about the G Bones over the Mini Cubics is the G Bones are a thinner, lighter weight wheel. So given that the G Bones are lighter weight, grippier, and faster, really, to me, in my opinion, for skate park riding, the G Bones have every advantage over the Mini Cubic. There's not really anything that the Mini Cubics are doing better than the G Bones.